Paul Shapiro, you are the author of the Clean Meat book, and you are also the CEO of Better Meat Co. You are also a five-time TED speaker, and today I would like to speak to you about your history, about how you became vegan, about the history of the Better Meat Co., and also about the evolution of the meat eating culture around the world. So first of all, thank you so much for joining us today.
Elaine, what a pleasure to be with you. Mucho gusto conocerte. And I'm very glad that we are getting a chance to chat.
So yeah, you guys speak a lot of Spanish in California, is it that you are based?
I am based in California, and my wife is of Mexican descent.
I have had a plant-based diet for almost 20 years, and we will go into that. But first of all, I find the story of how you became vegan very interesting. Can you tell us how is it that you became vegan?
Yeah, sure, Elaine. So about 31 years ago in 1993, a friend of mine showed me a video of what happens to animals who are used for food. And I was really shocked. And, there was no YouTube or internet back then. Again, this was 1993. So, he showed me a VHS tape of what goes on. And I kept thinking as I was watching this, what if those were my dogs? If those are my dogs locked up in cages or being hung upside down and having their throats cut, like what would I do? And I knew the answer is I would do anything to prevent that type of violence and cruelty from befalling them. And so I started thinking, well, if I wouldn't want this to happen to my dogs, why should I want it to happen to any animal, a pig or a cow or a turkey or a chicken? And as a result, I decided to become a vegetarian. Now, at that time, I did not know what a vegan was, but I got a piece of literature that talked about it. Now, I thought it was a vegan, not a vegan. And I thought, oh, what is this vegan? And I thought, that it's kind of an interesting, maybe noble thing to do to not eat any animal products. But at the time, I thought, this is probably not good for you. I thought like, it was kind of like holding your breath. Like you can hold your breath for some time, but if you do it too long, you're going to die. And I thought, well, maybe that's like what I would do. Like if I were to become one of these so-called vegans, that I would do it for a short time before dying. But then I learned that there were people who were called vegans and that many of them have been doing it for a long time. And in fact, at that time, the number one Olympian in the world was Carl Lewis, and I worshiped him. I had his poster on my parents' wall. I really thought highly of him. And I read an interview in which Carl Lewis talked about the fact that he was vegan, and I just couldn't believe it. Like, not only what did I think this was a good thing to do for animals, but here was, in my view, the best athlete in the world telling people that he was actually vegan, and that blew my mind. And so I decided to become vegan. And 31 years later, I haven't died yet. And it's been a wild ride.
Okay, well, my ex-wife, she became vegan just as you. She saw some videos, she felt horrified. Since then, she has been showing those videos to almost everyone that she can think of. I haven't watched the videos. I thought it made sense, for the environment, for to decrease cruelty against animals, so on and so forth. But I know that those videos may have effects on people like you and my ex-wife, but a lot of people are totally insensitive. In fact, at one time, slaughterhouses used to be in the middle of the city, like in New York, for example, 100 years ago, and people used to go there to watch in life how these animals were slaughtered. And so I don't know if I totally believe that if people were to see the cruelty that is inflicted upon animals, if they will stop eating meat altogether, they probably use it as another topic of conversation, like, oh, how cruel that was, and then eat another steak.
I totally agree with you, Elaine. I think that, there's a saying that many people have asserted, which is that if slaughterhouses had glass walls, we'd all be vegetarian. But it's obviously not true. It's just not true. Most people who watch a video of what happens inside of a slaughterhouse do not become vegetarian. And even many people who see it in person don't go vegetarian. And many of those who do go vegetarian eventually stop being vegetarian. And so I believe that there are some people, maybe like your ex-wife, maybe like myself, for whom such videos are truly impactful. But I think for most people, they're not. They generally will think, oh, that's too bad, or I feel bad for them, but it's not sufficient to spark real dietary change. And I think, look, human beings are social creatures. We like to fit in and be popular within our own crowd. And it's very tough because to all of a sudden be very different from your own crowd. your family, your friends, they probably all eat meat. And so it's very difficult to say, actually, I don't eat what you do anymore. So even if, you rationally think it's the right thing to do, socially, it's a very difficult thing to do. And because we are not rational animals, we are social animals, we generally do things that we think are going to preserve our status within our social group. And so that's why I always recommend for people who are interested in adopting a plant-based diet, meet some other people. I'm not saying don't be friends with your current set of friends, obviously, but I am saying, meet some people who share that passion and, go to vegan restaurants with them or talk to them online at least, just so that you have some social support for people who are going to be, amenable to the decision that you've made.
Yeah, and there's also the double standard about these animals are okay, but these animals are not okay. For example, you love your dogs and you couldn't imagine something like that happening to your dogs. And I have plenty of friends who say, oh, I love animals. I donate, I don't know, X amount of dollars for the conservation of this species or the whales or whatever, but then go and eat another cow and just find this that there is not a connection, that this beautiful dog that you have in your house and that cow that is in the slaughterhouse, they are both the same kind of sentient animals, and it just somehow it doesn't connect.
Yeah, we have a very hard time as a species with cognitive dissonance. It makes us feel very uncomfortable, and so we don't like to think about it. So let me give you a few examples. When we relied on horses for transportation, which was for thousands of years, very few people felt bad about the suffering of horses. Yet the only reason they transported us was under the threat of violence. We whipped them, we kicked them, we beat them. That's why they transported us. And when we stopped using horses for transportation because bikes and cars were invented, we came to see horses very differently. Rather than just seeing them as a machine for us to get around in, we viewed them almost like companion animals, which is how a lot of people view horses today. Similarly, no one thought of whales as majestic in the 19th and 18th century because we were reliant on whaling to light our homes. Today, people will pay money to get on a boat merely to look at whales because we view them as so majestic. But if we were reliant on the death and slaughter of whales to light our homes still, I don't think many people would be doing it because the cognitive dissonance would be so great to say, oh, look at these animals. We can't really see them as individuals who deserve compassion and respect in the way that we would if we weren't exploiting them. So I think that probably what will be necessary for people to make that connection between, the fact that they love their dog and the cow or the pig or the chicken really isn't that different from their dog, is probably first for them to start at least cutting back on the amount of meat that they're consuming. And then that will free us up to have a different understanding and a different view of animals than we do today. One in which we recognize that the fellow creatures on this planet don't exist merely for us, but rather exist with us. And that, I think, will go a long way toward helping to prevent the cruelty that's so rampant today, that is subjected to animals who we eat.
Yeah, okay. Just one more question in regards to this dissonance is uh, everyone knows Greta Thunberg is a Swedish activist. She came to Montreal, and there were about 500,000 people manifesting in the street. Clean, save the planet, save the earth, so on and so forth. And after she left, everyone, of course, they went to their local burger joint to order a hamburger. And it seems as well that there is not a direct relationship. In fact, I was having dinner with a friend who is an a climate activist 2 days ago, and then she was speaking about the chicken soup and the pork chops that she was gonna have for dinner. So also there is a huge disconnect there.
Yeah. Yeah. Look, there's a big disconnect. People find it very easy to point our finger at the oil company or the coal company, but very few people want to point their finger at themselves, right? And say, oh, I am part of the problem. It's very unlikely that that's going to happen. And this is why I am so bullish on creating technologies that can recreate the meat experience without animals. Because if it's true that people have to cut back on their animal use before they start making the connection between animals and the other matters that we're discussing here, then we need to give them something that they'll eat. I wish that people were going to be happy to eat lentil soup and bean and rice burritos.
I
And
am happy to eat lentil soup.
frankly, Elaine, I am too. I think of those foods as great foods, but most people want meat. You know, most people want meat, and meat demand is going up almost everywhere. It's going up in China, India, Brazil, Mexico, all the places it's going to matter the most in the future. Meat demand is going up, not down. And so we got to find some way to recreate the meat experience without animals. It's kind of like the fact that, you know, we could say, well, it would be great if people wanted to walk and bike more. Well, people seem to like to drive. And
Right.
so it's imperative that we create cars that don't rely on fossil fuels, otherwise known as electric vehicles. And maybe that, you know, maybe people will want to walk and bike more. I actually find that generally speaking, people who become vegetarian or vegan at first really like eating the meat alternatives quite a lot, the plant-based meat alternatives. And then they get to a point, usually, not everywhere, but usually where then they start moving toward more of the types of foods like we were just talking about, which is, you know, like a bean and rice burrito as an example. But we need a transition, and that transition is going to be, I think, fueled by technologies that can help give us the same experience of meat that people really crave and enjoy, but without having to exploit animals in the process.
So how far away? I know the technology already exists. How long are we from it to be at the same cost level as a regular burger in the supermarket?
Yeah, pretty far away.
Mm.
So most of the companies that are producing in this space are making products that many of them do taste good, not all of them, but many of them do taste good, but they're generally speaking sold at much higher prices than animal-based meat. And so I'll give you an example. I bought some plant-based burgers in Safeway just last week. It was two patties, both of them a quarter pound, and it was $8.99. So that means it's $18 per pound. Now, even organic grass-fed beef is, you know, closer to like $9 a pound, whereas this is $18 a pound, which, you know, is, so you're talking like not 30 or 40% more expensive than the conventional commodity meat, but, you know, 300 or 400% more expensive. So that is a real problem, that a lot of these foods are just substantially more expensive than their counterparts. And so if we can get to a place, though, where the industry is big enough that it can compete against conventional meat on both taste and price, I think that is a time where you're going to see a substantial shift. Not everybody, but a substantial shift, so that this will go from being a niche where it is around like 1% of the market, to going to, you know, somewhere maybe even upwards of 10 or 15% of the market.
And isn't a conventional meat heavily subsidized by the government or some governments? What can you tell us about that?
Animal agriculture benefits from very lavish governmental policies. It's not just direct subsidies, it's also indirect subsidies in the form of crop insurance for the main feed that goes into these products. And it's direct money being given to them. I'll give you an example. The Biden administration put forth $500 million just to promote increased animal slaughter capacity in the United States. Those aren't those aren't loans, those are grants, just taxpayer dollars. So there's a lot of governmental support that the animal agriculture industry gets. And that support really should be flowing to the alternative protein makers. If you look at what we're doing now to try to catch up with Asia on clean energy tech, you know, we're spending billions of dollars in the United States to onshore solar panel creation, wind turbine creation, even semiconductors. All of those are really produced in China or Taiwan or some other Asian nation right now. But now the US is spending literally tens of billions of dollars to try to onshore those industries. Well, we shouldn't wait until Asia is dominating the clean protein race also. Instead, we should be investing in that type of animal-free food future right now.
Okay, talking about Asia, I read an article about Singapore subsidizing their milk production capabilities, while at the same time in states like Florida and Alabama, selling or marketing laboratory meat, to call it, is illegal. So can you mention, comment on those discrepancies right there?
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, states like Alabama and Florida are waving the white flag of surrender to countries like China when it comes to the future of food. Those two states in particular have recently made it illegal to sell cultivated meat in their states, cultivated meat being real meat grown that's slaughter-free. And by doing that, what they're trying to do is help out their local cattle industries to say that they're going to try to prevent future competition for them. But what they're really doing is hurting American innovation American entrepreneurialism, because where are people going to start the next big companies? In places like China, where they're actively courting companies like that, or in America, where they're criminalizing it. It would be similar to if Blockbuster 20 years ago had lobbied to ban video streaming because they were concerned it was going to put Blockbuster video rental stores out of business. We all know that that would not have worked, but that's what states like Florida and Alabama are doing.
Okay, and can you give us a little bit more information about your company, the Better Meat Co? You are the CEO. Where is it? How far away is it before I can actually buy some of your products right here in my local Montreal supermarket?
Sure. So the Better Meat Co. is an ingredients company. We don't sell branded products that you're going to see on a supermarket. We sell ingredients that food companies use to manufacture their products. And the key ingredient that we manufacture is a fermented protein that's called rhizomycoprotein. Rhizomycoprotein is a delicious, whole food, all natural, unprocessed product that in its all natural whole food state not only has the texture of meat, but also has a superior nutritional profile. It has more protein than eggs, more iron and more zinc than beef, more fiber than oats, more potassium than bananas, and it doesn't have the things about meat that you don't want. So it's got all the things about meat you do want, the texture, the protein, the iron, the zinc, and so on, but it doesn't have the things about meat that you don't want, the saturated fat, the cholesterol, the animal cruelty, the environmental degradation, and more. And so this really gets you the best of both worlds, something that gives you that meat-like experience, but without having to raise animals.
And this is a money podcast. I talk about investments. To be honest, I was all gung ho about the meatless industry, and I bought some Beyond Meat shares.
Oh, no.
And I managed to get out of profit, but some of my more hardcore friends, they are now on the negative. Can you tell us, as investors, where can we focus our attention? What would be I don't know, a few sets of companies to look at, or a category of investments that we could put, I mean, if we believe in this industry, that we could look at and consider for investments?
Absolutely. So there are only a couple publicly traded companies in this space, and they're not doing that well. Now, you could say, well, now is the time to buy. The price is very low. But most of the companies in this space, including my own, the Better Meat Co, are startups that are still haven't gone public. And so the real opportunities here are in these early stage startups where you can invest in the private markets when they have offerings. So for example, my company, the Better Meat Co, is in the midst of a fundraising round right now as we speak. It's May 2024. And if people are interested in owning a piece of the company and in investing in the future of these whole food, unprocessed, delicious alternative meat ingredients, I'd love to hear from you. You can get in touch with us through our website, which is bettermeat.co. Again, that's bettermeat.co. And let's talk about building the future of the meat industry without animals in the future together.
Okay, well, fantastic. Well, we're coming towards the end. Can you tell us a little bit, first of all, about your book? You devoted quite a lot of time writing that book, and also I saw that you have a podcast. And I love the TED talk that you made about the all products that have replaced those animals.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you very much, Elaine. So I wrote a book. It's called Clean Meat: How Growing Meat Without Animals Will Revolutionize Dinner and the World. That book chronicles the stories of the entrepreneurs, the investors, the scientists, all of whom are racing to commercialize the world's first slaughter-free meat.
Wow.
It's a pop science book, or kind of like a pop business book. It's not tech heavy, and it does a great job of telling the tale of why this industry exists and who the people behind it are. The book has done better than I ever dreamt. It was totally transformative in my life. It was debuted on the Washington Post bestseller list. It was reviewed everywhere from NPR to the Wall Street Journal, and it's been translated into over 10 other languages. So I've been very gratified by the reception of the book. There's a new paperback edition of the book that just came out last month in April of 2024. It's still called Clean Meat: How Growing Meat Without Animals Will Revolutionize Dinner in the World, but it's an updated paperback edition that you can get anywhere books are sold.
Okay, and your TED Talk, and yes, well, can you tell us? I mean, I'm gonna link to it on the show notes, but can you summarize it because I did a very poor job summarizing your TED Talk.
Oh, it's very kind of you, Elaine. So, in short, if you think about the fact that for thousands of years, the only way that we really had to write letters was with quill pens. And nobody stopped using quills because they cared about geese, right? Nobody thought, oh, we shouldn't be live plucking geese. They stopped because metal fountain pens were invented, and it was a superior way to write than using a quill. Similarly, for thousands of years, we used whale oil to light our homes, as I mentioned earlier. And nobody stopped whaling because they cared about whales. They stopped because kerosene was invented and it was a cheaper, cleaner way to light our homes. For thousands of years, we whipped horses to get around. Nobody stopped because they cared about horses. They stopped because bikes and cars were invented, and that was an easier, more better way to get around. And so here are three examples among many of where for thousands of years we had relied on animals for an important part of the economy. And within a matter of only a decade or two, these industries got decimated by new technologies that were simply superior. They weren't motivated by humane sentiment. They weren't motivated by sustainability concerns. It was simply that somebody created a better way to achieve the same thing. It wasn't identical. It's not like somebody made a mechanical horse that ran faster. They come up with a car, which was way better. It's not like, somebody came up with a new type of whale oil or a way to make whale oil burn longer. They just found the stuff in the ground and figured out how to turn it into kerosene. And now, of course, kerosene has been displaced, thankfully, by electricity. And so that industry got decimated too. The point is that new inventions, new technology have a great way sometimes of rendering old exploitative practices obsolete. And my hope is that the work of companies like the Better Meat Co. is going to do the same, that we will invent technology that makes slaughterhouses and factory farms a relic of an archaic past, just in the way that you would be shocked today if you were to see somebody writing with a quill pen or using a horse to get from point A to point B. Maybe you'll be shocked in the future that people are still choosing slaughter-based meat when
Okay.
humanity has invented something so obviously better.
Yeah, yeah. When I was doing research for this interview, I went to your Instagram account and I saw you with your best friend. Who's your best friend?
So my best friend is say pit bull named Eddie, and he is really a large portion of the happiness of my life. So if you look at a pie chart of the sources of happiness in my life, my dog Eddie would definitely be a large part of it. Obviously, my wife would be a big part too, but I have to keep it real and say, Eddie is a big part of the happiness in my life. And if you want to experience the happiness that he brings, he has his own Instagram account. He's at Eddie the Pity. That's EDDIE, the Pity. You can go check him out, and he's a lot of fun. He brings joy to a lot of people.
I will link to him. Well, Paul, the last question is where people can find out more about you, about Eddie. Well, you just told us how to find out more about Eddie, but your podcast, yes, people who want to connect with you, where can they follow you?
Great. So the easiest thing is to go to bettermeat.co and get in touch. But I also have another website that's called paul-shapiro.com, which is everything about the podcast that I host, the book, and other things that I write and other things that I'm up to. So that's at paul-shapiro.com.
Paul, thank you so much for your time.
Wayne, it's my pleasure. Thanks so much. Great to chat with you.